Welcome to part 2 of our 5-part series on not-for-profit financials. I'm Jackie McLaughlin with Chazin & Company. As your outsourced accounting professionals, we can help. In part 2, we're going to talk about fiduciary responsibility. Why? Because as an executive director or board member, you have one. The problem with fiduciary responsibility is that people hear the terminology, but most don't really know what it means. So on this slide and the next slide, we're going to read the legal definitions and then we'll translate. So executive directors and board members are fiduciaries who steer the organization towards a sustainable future by adopting sound ethical and legal governance and financial management policies, as well as by making sure the nonprofit has adequate resources to advance its mission. There are 3 primary legal responsibilities. The duty of care, which means you make prudent use of all assets, exercise oversight to ensure effectiveness and sustainability, and act with a greater degree of care than you might give your own affairs. Next, there is a duty of loyalty. Make decisions in the best interest of the organization, irrespective of any personal interests of anyone. And finally, a duty of obedience. Ensure the activities advance the mission and adhere to the organization's purpose, and obey applicable laws and act following ethical standards. So what does all that mean? Being a fiduciary is kind of like being a parent. Let's take each of these legal responsibilities one by one and compare them to decisions you make every day when you're parenting your children. So number 1, duty of care. You have a responsibility to ensure that your personal finances can put a roof over your children's head, food in their stomach, and clothes on their backs. Now, maybe you want to take a fabulous European vacation, and maybe you want to go first class, and that's going to be $20,000 for 1 or 2 people. If going on that vacation means your children don't eat for 6 months so that you can save the money to go on vacation, you're going to forfeit the vacation and you're going to feed your children instead. That's an example of a duty of care. You also have a duty of loyalty. So in parenting, you may get a promotion or a job opportunity that's all the way across the country, and it may be great for your career. But if you have children, you may not automatically take it. Instead, you'll think about how that move across the country will impact your children. And if you have, say, a senior in high school, you may elect not to take the promotion or the new job because you may not want to move your child in his or her senior year of high school. That's a duty of loyalty. Duty of obedience. Primarily in parenting, duty of obedience is the example that we set to our children. They often don't listen as much to what we say as they do watch what we do. So other than that occasional speeding ticket that I'm sure all of us have gotten, we live our everyday life obeying the laws of our city and state and country. Our children watch that. We don't steal, we don't lie, we don't cheat anybody. We're setting that example for our children. In the same manner as a fiduciary, you should be acting with integrity and the highest degree of ethics so that the staff that works for the organization can see you acting that way and follow suit. So you do have a risk that comes with this legal responsibility. One of the risks is that you can be held liable for damages caused by your wrongful acts or omissions. Wrongful. Your best defense to this risk is to understand your responsibilities as an officer or understand your fiduciary responsibility and ensure that the organization follows the law and its bylaws. You can insure against your risk as well. There's something called directors and officers insurance that will help protect you from this. Often organizations shy away from this because they think it will be cost prohibitive. It's generally not, and it's definitely worth a call to your insurance agent to get a quote. Ideally, you want to reduce your risk. And the best way to reduce your risk is to be familiar with your organization's financial statements. In upcoming videos, we're going to talk about the two primary financial statements that not-for-profits use, and we'll walk you through each of those statements. Understand the internal controls in your organization and make sure they're as strong as they possibly can be. Strong internal controls dovetails with the E in this acronym for ensure. Ensure that no single person has too much power or control over financials. So this means ideally you don't want the same person putting money in the bank that's writing checks, that's doing the bank reconciliation. Ideally, you want that to be 3 different people. Now, if your budget is too small to hire 3 different people to do each of those activities and strengthen internal controls, there are mitigating controls you can put into effect, and we would love to help you with that. That's just one example of internal controls. Other examples of internal controls are reducing the number of individuals in your organization who have a company credit card, requiring that they turn in receipts with that credit card, and requiring that those cards be properly approved. Another example of a strong internal control is having somebody approve payroll after it's been processed, but before it's been submitted to pay people. And then you want to set the proper tone at the top, and that goes back to the fiduciary responsibility. Just like your children, your staff are going to watch what you do more than they listen to what you say. So be sure and make decisions and act with integrity and the highest ethics. There are some policies that support a proper tone at the top. One is a conflict of interest policy. It's interesting because conflict of interest accounts for 35% of all fraud cases. And generally in a not-for-profit, what conflict of interest means is that an executive or a board member might be given business by the nonprofit for transactions that are in the board member's best interest and not the organization's best interest. Let me give you 2 examples. I'll give you a bad example and a good example. We'll end on the high note with the good. The bad example is that at one point in time, before I worked with Chazin and Company, I was a CFO of a not-for-profit. And one day a board member came into my office and threw a bunch of papers on my desk and demanded that I sign them. These papers were investment documents. This board member wanted to move a significant amount of funds from where they were currently invested to an annuity. Now, I don't know much about investments, but I know annuities are generally better for the financial planner who's providing them. And in this case, that board member was the financial planner. Now, not only did I not have the authority to sign these documents, but I wouldn't. The real committee that had the authority to sign these documents was the investment committee. So there was a reason he wanted to bypass them and come straight to me. I wouldn't sign the documents, and he continued to come into my office every week for 1 or 2 months and get more and more aggressive. I held my own and said that he had to go back to the investment committee and get them to sign off on this restructuring of the investments. He finally had no choice but to do that, and the investment committee said no. Bad example of conflict of interest. There was another situation I was involved in where the organization was in a high cost of living area, and the organization needed to rent a number of parking spaces. It was somewhere around 50 parking spaces for a combination of its staff and its stakeholders. There was a board member, chairman of the board as a matter of fact, who had real estate that consisted of parking, and he was willing to rent the parking spaces to the organization for $14,000 a month. However, Before he went forward with this, he talked to the appropriate staff and encouraged them to get competitive bids. At the next board meeting, he brought up the parking situation and his estimate of how much he would charge to provide these for the organization. He then also let the staff present the findings of the competitive bids they had obtained. At that point, he recused himself from the meeting, left the room, and the board took a vote. In this situation, the board did vote to give the contract to the chairman of the board because all of the cost estimates came in at $14,000. They all came in at the same amount of money. So why not give it to the chairman of the board? That is a good example of a conflict of interest policy at play. It doesn't prohibit board members from doing business with the organization. It just sets out a process to do it the right way so that the organization gets the best possible deal and it's not just a win for a board member. Another policy that supports tone at the top is a whistleblower policy. It accounts for 43% of all fraud detection. Usually this is a hotline or an email that an employee can call or write to anonymously if they see things being done in the organization that are suspect. And that hotline or email answerer, the person on the other end of that, takes all of these anonymous tips seriously and does an investigation to prove that something is going on or that it was just a misunderstanding. It's important to note that auditors are not in the business to prevent or detect fraud. Every time I give this presentation and there's an auditor in the room, they cheer and get very excited about it. They will be the first to tell you they are not in the business to prevent or detect fraud. Therefore, you cannot rely on your annual audit as a control. Auditors are there to audit your financial statements, ensure that they are materially correct, and that they're in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. If during the course of that audit they suspect fraud, they will certainly bring it to your attention, but that's not what they're there to do. This concludes part 2 in our 5-part series on not-for-profit financial statements. I'll see you in the next video.